Views and opinions expressed in this production are those of the individual and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Shooters Nation or our sponsors. Information provided on this show is not a replacement for legal counsel or professional training. Listener and viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows.
Welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast, the show created for you, the armed citizen. Join our hosts and subject matter experts as we talk about guns and gear, practical training and knowledge, Second Amendment issues, and the firearms culture. Be sure to join us after the show at shootersnation.com and become part of the Shooters Nation.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Shooters Nation podcast. The episode you're about to listen to is part one of a two-part series with retired U.S. Navy SEAL and creator of the Full Spectrum Warrior System, Rich Graham. When Mark and I first sat down with Rich, we anticipated that we would have about an hour or so of his time to talk about a short list of subjects. What actually transpired, though, was nearly 2.5 hours of incredibly diverse discussion about a variety of things. Rather than rush through or try to package this into one really long episode, Mark and I have decided to split it up into two parts, each roughly an hour in length. In today's episode, Rich teaches us a very simple and methodical approach to dealing with and surviving an active threat at your workplace or out in public. He gives us an idiot-proof set of tools that anyone can use to make it home at the end of the worst day of their life. We also begin exploring the role that very basic physical fitness plays in making you a better shooter, and how Rich incorporates aspects of that in a training system that you can start in the privacy of your own home today and then take with you onto your local shooting range tomorrow. Mark and I are thrilled to bring this conversation with Rich Graham to you, and we hope that you'll download the conclusion, part 2, in next week's episode. So, without further ado, on behalf of Mark Lancaster and myself, here is the interview with Rich Graham, creator of the Full Spectrum Warrior System, president of the Homefront Canine Project, and vice president of SEAL Swim Charities. So joining us today as our guest subject matter expert is Rich Graham. Rich, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Rich, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, and then I can kind of go into it a little bit as well and brag on you a bit. But just if you and I were to have just met each other at a conference, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'll just say I'm Rich Graham, and military veteran, and now I'm a firearms and tactics instructor for law enforcement agencies around the country, and then I do a lot of civilian work as well, working with shooting schools and stuff like that. And then we do a lot of charity work for veteran suicide prevention, and we do service dog training for active duty special forces families and disabled veterans. So we got a lot of things that we're juggling, but it's all good stuff.
Yeah, you got a lot of irons in the fire, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so, folks, let me kind of tell you a little bit about Mr. Graham. Definitely the quiet professional. And that was probably one of the most humble intros that I could imagine a guy with your resume that would give, right? But my job to brag on you a little bit. So Rich, SEAL Team 10 operator, SEAL Team sniper, trained security for the 2004 Olympics, and then oversaw security teams in the 2016 Olympics, which is pretty amazing. We were chatting before the show, and that's similar to one of our former guests, William, who also former Navy SEAL or retired Navy SEAL. I get in trouble calling anybody former anything, right? That's once you're a SEAL, you're always a SEAL. But you've also, like you said, you've done a lot of counterterrorism training and such with law enforcement and civilians and military. And you also do a lot of work in the professional athletic arena with athletes and doing security and training and physical training, fitness training with them, and leadership coaching, which I thought was pretty amazing. That is seems to be a characteristic trait of Navy SEALs is you guys know a thing or two about leadership. So it's
the things just all start parlaying into each other, and that's really where we started creating this the full spectrum warrior training philosophy is because there's so much to it. There's so much to being a modern day fighter and paralleling all the different aspects of that of your firearms training and having a good background in combatives. And to do that effectively, you have to be able to be fit and you have to have range of motion, and that needs to be supported usually by a diet. Some people are just genetic freaks and they can eat whatever they want, but like, there's that whole thing. And then paralleling that, is leadership, communication, teamwork. There's, you don't want to just be a meathead, a thoughtless goon. Like you want to be smart. You want to be able to work with teams and whatnot. So there's a lot that goes into it, but everything at some point, all this stuff connects and they all touch each other in some way. You can't build on one and neglect the other aspects and truly be successful in my opinion.
No, I think, as I've read anything about the SEALs, Jocko Willink's books or, Marcus Luttrell's accounts and things, it seems like, a very core germane tenet of the Navy SEAL program is to pick the best of the best, the guys who are sharp, mentally and physically able. But the core tenet being it pays to be a winner. Right. And so they get the people that can work together, because winning generally takes teamwork and it takes mental acuity. And it's fantastic that guys such as yourself come back out and bring something that was so heavily invested and cultivated in you to make other people safer and better. And, with the bar of entry for us is a lot less lower. And I can say I can eat just about anything I want to as well. It's just that it doesn't benefit me that way. It goes the other way real quick. So I know what you mean about the genetic freaks. I envy them. So, but no, it's fantastic to have you here tonight. And I think that the listeners, after I've looked through the notes and thought about what we were going to talk about tonight, this is going to be a really good one for the listeners, especially those that want something practical that will help make them better, safer, or more prepared for the worst day of their lives, right? And it seems like that's kind of what you're after here. It's a very well-rounded approach to that. So you hinted a little bit about the full spectrum warrior approach. What can you tell us about that? Are there like areas of focus that are key to that system that you've developed and are teaching folks? And how does it all begin?
Well, essentially, there are key aspects of it, and in a perfect world, you would build the system in order. But the reality of it is, people want the final product first. So the main lure is people come in for tactical firearms training, whether it's law enforcement or civilians. There's a lot of people who've spent, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on their gun collection, and then they're like, dude, I have no idea how to use this damn thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we have a lot of people who come for training like that, or they got their concealed carry and they want to learn, tactics for home protection or for any of that stuff. So a lot of times people want the final product. They want to, shoot like a special forces operator or whatever. And, they come out to the courses, and then very quickly they come to the realization through just doing a few of the drills that, man, I'm not as good a shape as I thought I was. Being out here and holding this gun up all day is extremely tiring. Running or getting my heart rate up and then trying to shoot is very difficult to do. Getting into some of these unorthodox shooting positions, I don't have the range of motion, or my knees hurt, or my back hurts, or whatever. So as we get the people on the range, we then start to go, hey man, this is why our fitness is so important. This is why range of motion is important. As we get into the concealed carry stuff and we start to learn more about the laws and the limitations of what you can and can't do, or even with the fact that most concealed carry guns might have 10 rounds or less, how many bad guys can you really take on? When can you actually draw your gun? In many cases, we might actually be in a fist fight first to then, or be attacked first and then that provides us the legal opportunity to then draw a firearm to protect ourselves or some other type of weapon.
Right.
So sometimes the people want the final product first, and then as we start the training, we start reverse engineering it and going, hey, now that you're here, we can actually open this up to you and let you really see what the final product is going to take. Now you're aware of what steps we need to start backtracking on and areas that we need to focus on to develop you as an individual. And it's going to be different with every person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we look at it and go, where do we need to develop you as an individual to build onto those? You know, we want to focus on your strengths, but there's certain weak spots that we have to get up to, you know, at least a manageable level. That way that you can be actually proficient and, actually have a good confidence that you can protect yourself or your family, or you can, train or shoot at the level that you want.
Right. Right. So I think that is a perfect lead into kind of the synopsis of the overall, or the overarching topic tonight. Mark threw this out earlier, and I think maybe with some of your guidance, we're going to talk about active shooter response and physical fitness and how they play into defensive tactics, right? And I guess particularly, how can a citizen respond, or how should they respond in an active shooter scenario, whether they're armed or unarmed, or whether it starts in an unarmed confrontation, hands-on, we like you said, that fist fight, and then maybe it leads into something more where deadly force with a tool is required. And if you're game, we'll walk through that conversation over the course of this episode, and hopefully, give the listener something that they can walk away from this with that makes them a little bit better or safer. And definitely, I want them to come away with something that at least whets their appetite to learn more from you and others like you, wherever they're at. So that sounds like a good plan with you. All right, cool. All right, we'll go with it then. So, Rich, I definitely want to make sure that we get some points through tonight that are very important, but maybe the best way to start off is just with some questions, right? And so Mark and I put some questions together for you, and as we do this, hopefully the conversation just kind of unfolds for us. But so you were talking about the self-defense training, and it sounds like the self-defense training, the physical fitness, the preparedness is really just something that augments or is a companion or a lead into the tool. And the tool for our conversation, I guess tonight, is essentially the handgun, whether that's for a civilian or for a law enforcement officer. So you've talked a little bit about bringing a person in and diagnosing some of their deficiencies and getting them started on a curriculum that makes them better. Let's just say that Mark and I are two guys coming to one of your classes. What could we maybe expect in that experience, to start it off with? What's a day, how's that start off for a student in your class?
So if we're talking on the side of like a defensive pistol class, is that because that's a very broad, spectrum, because some different things that we train.
Well, I guess let's just maybe think about it from the perspective of that active shooter. We come to you and say, hey, Rich, or maybe our company sponsors a class and brings you in to teach us as employees of big nameless company to be prepared for an active shooter, because that seems to be a thing that is in the news more and more, regrettably more and more these days, right? How would you take Mark and I as just desk jockeys from nameless big company and teach us a little bit more about how to deal with that sort of threat?
All right. So where I normally go with this, so as far as the active shooter response, a lot of people focus on the firearm, and it is a great tool to help win, but we don't know which method the attack is going to come in. The firearm doesn't really help us if the people are using a bomb. The firearm doesn't necessarily help us if they try to run us over with a car. You know what I mean? Or maybe it does. Maybe you shoot them, but normally that happens so fast and it's in such a crowded area, like you really wouldn't have the chance to respond until once the person's crashed and the actual assault with the vehicle is now over. But the main thing with this is to understand and have a game plan. And our acronym that I developed is called SLIME. And I wish I had a cooler word. It's just, it is what it is.
SLIME.
But when we have them, Yeah, slime.
Okay.
SLIME. So there's the first thing first in this is understanding the threat. And we have to understand the intent of the threat. And I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version, but basically, what is the difference between, recognizing the difference between someone who's trying to rob you or something like that versus a person who's engaged in a terrorist, active shooter style attack. It doesn't have to be a gun. It could be running through and stabbing everyone like they've seen a lot in Europe.
Yeah.
It could be a vehicle like discussed. So it doesn't actually have to be someone shooting. But that type of intent where they're just out to kill as many people as possible, we need to recognize that, because especially in a workplace violence kind of situation, you're going to go into shock. You're going to go into disbelief. This doesn't happen here. I'm in a safe space. This is out of the normal. If you're in a war zone or you're a police officer, working on a daily basis, and you're going into that high risk environment on a daily basis, you're anticipating the fact that there may be violence or attacks coming your way. Right. You don't anticipate that when you go to work or go to church. That stuff's not supposed to happen there. So when you do see it, it's out of context, and it's going to take time. There's a lag time for your brain to actually understand what it's seeing. It's going to be like, that doesn't make sense, and that does not compute, and there's a lag time.
Right.
Then actually accepting the fact that it's happening and then being able to react to it. So the first thing we need to do is to accept the reality is actually real. You know what I mean? And break out of shock. So everyone talks about going into fight or flight. The first thing you're probably going to do is freeze, right? Even if you're at the mall, like, holy crap. Like, if you look at all those active shooter attacks, let's take Parkland.
Yeah.
They started interviewing all those girls afterwards. Nothing to do with them being girls, but like, they were talking to I was watching the interviews, and they're talking to all these girls, and every single one of them was like, I just can't believe it was real. I thought someone was lighting off fireworks. It had to have been a prank. They listed off every single excuse of what it could have been, other than the fact that someone was shooting.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was out of context for their school. It was out of context for their lifestyle and everything like that. So in that location, their brain was trying to come up with other alternative solutions of what this could be, right? And this is a very dangerous place for us to find ourselves in, because time is not on our side. If someone's trying to rob us, we can slow things down and try to negotiate, because I have something they want. If they want my wallet or my watch, I can fumble to get my wallet out or fumble to get the watch off my wrist, and slow things down and talk to them and negotiate. Hey man, I'll give you whatever you want. And now I can leverage the item that they want, and I can slow it down and start to control the tempo a little bit. I'm not in control, but I have a form of control. In an active shooter attack, we don't. So the main thing, first things first, is snapping out of shock and then reducing our size, right? As I reduce my size, I create movement, right, within my body, and this helps me snap out of shock. You know what I mean? And it's hard to demonstrate that really on the recording here, but we have certain tips that we give people for positions, body positions they can get into without committing to the ground, right? To basically snap out of shock. And one of them you could think of is like going into an athletic stance.
Okay.
So I start to reduce my size, jumping into like an athletic stance. Think of any athlete, you name a sport, maybe except for like curling, but like all the other like real sports. You know what I mean? Like, there's a typical athletic stance that we into.
Kind of square off, right? Almost like the prize fighter that kind of hunch. Yeah.
Yeah, you hunch down, you bend your legs a little bit,
and
neurologically it stimulates us. We see it. The ball's getting ready to get passed in basketball. You don't just stand there with your knees locked, standing up straight, hips pushed forward. You crouch down a little bit, you get an athletic stance.
Yeah, you're ready.
So by dropping into athletic stance, this by default puts our body into motion, puts our chemistry into motion, our neurological system into motion to think and react fast. That's why all athletes use that position consistently across all sports, almost every sport.
Very cool.
So we jump into this position, and now the L in slime we start to locate. I can't run, I can't fight, I can't do anything if I haven't located where the hell the threat is.
Right.
So I start to locate the threat. Once I locate the threat, then I can locate where exits are. Because when we pressure test active shooter training, half the time the group runs straight into the bad guy.
Oh, no kidding.
Because they didn't locate him. They just started running around frantically.
Right.
They're not thinking. They're just reacting in a frenzy, right? So we locate. And once I locate, I then identify. Hey, how many attackers is there? What is the weapon system they're using? What is the direction they're traveling? What are they saying to each other? And now that I've located and identified who the threat is, I can now locate and identify cover, concealment, exit based on the direction of travel, the weapon system they're using, because I could hide behind one thing. You know, if the dude's attacking with a vehicle, I can stand behind one of those concrete pillars that's 6 inches in diameter, and I just step off the sidewalk and get behind the pillar. If they have a gun, I can't do that.
Right.
If they have a knife, I can't do that. So what I'm using for cover and concealment and all that is really dictated on what is the method of attack and who are they and etc. Once we start doing that, and again, to jump back real quick on my size reduction, like a side note, if you look at Las Vegas, someone shooting from an elevated position, a lot of the people in these mass gathering events, half the people are getting injured or killed by getting trampled.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of times in the military context, you're like, if you hear gunshots, get on the ground. Well, they're not in highly public places with lots of people.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we have to be careful of the tactics that we try to embed from our military experience into civilian world, because they don't all translate perfectly. So that's why we don't get on the ground, because if I lay on the ground in a crowd, I get trampled. It's hard to get back up. I can't locate the threat because I can't see them. And from a context of like Las Vegas, or even the one in Texas with the shooter up in the parking garage, when you lay down and someone's looking down at you from an elevated position, when you lay down, a lot of times you make yourself a bigger target.
Right.
And if you just stood there, you'd actually be smaller based on the perspective of your angle to the threat.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying we don't get on the ground, but when I do get on the ground, it's because I've located and identified the threat, and it is the best decision to do, right? I'm making decisions. I'm not just, running around aimlessly, without information, right? So after we locate and identify, and this whole thing works in a circle. So like you can keep coming back and revisiting as you get new information, you keep revisiting. Then what we would do is we basically say, hey, now that you've located and identified the threat, now you move. I can move to cover. I can move to concealment. I can move to an exit. I can move to go fight the guy. It just all depends on what I'm provided, the information and what's happening. And then the last step, the E, would be escape, evade, or engage. And this would be similar to the run, hide, fight, but there's a difference here where if I just say to someone, run, like your brain turns off and you just run, it's an action.
Right.
Right. So I would escape. If I say escape triggers a problem-solving response.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if your car went off a bridge and it was sinking and you have your seatbelt on and all this stuff, you're trying to figure out ways to escape from the vehicle. Or if your vehicle flipped and it's catching on fire, like you escape from the vehicle, you problem solve. Once I get out of the vehicle, I can run. Run might be one aspect of escaping, right? But it's not the only answer. You know what I mean? And we look at workplaces and stuff like that. My escape, might be me smashing through a sheetrock wall to get from one room into the other. You know what I mean? It might be going above the ceiling tiles. I don't know.
Sure.
It just depends. You know what I mean? But it's not just like a one thing where it's just, I just run.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because we want to have people thinking and making decisions.
Right.
So then if I can't escape, then the next thing I can do is evade. And a lot of times they say hide, you know what I mean? And the problem I find with hiding is, especially in a corporate environment or like a church or something like that, like the difference when the three of us were playing hide and seek as kids, and now is I'm not freaking 40 pounds anymore. Little kids are small. They can hide all sorts of spots.
Right.
But a lot of these active shooter attacks that happen in mass public environments, a lot of public environments are very minimalist in their design features because they're designed to house lots of people.
Sure.
So there's not a lot of little nooks and crannies and things like that. It's usually very simplistic. So where do all these adults hide? You know what I mean? So instead we would evade.
Right.
And evade would be moving, hiding, and keeping tabs of where the threat is until I can evade until I get to a spot to where I can then escape. If I'm in a hotel, like the attack in Mumbai, where all those people were in that hotel, those people were on the 5th and 6th floor. They couldn't just jump out the window. They couldn't get out. They couldn't run. So they were evading in the hotel until they could find a way to get out.
Buying time.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're evaluating, buying time, and it's that iterative loop through the whole process that you mentioned. Yeah, as you were going through that, Rich, I was thinking that the size reduction, the S, and the locate, the L. Though it sounds to me like, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, those things can run in parallel. You're doing both of those, really. If you're thinking quickly on your feet, yeah,
and it doesn't necessarily have to be in that order. It's just the way it makes it into a word.
Sure. No,
you know what I mean? Like, I can locate, identify, and then reduce my size. You know what I mean? But But you do it in that order. You can remember the word slime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the whole thing is circular. And then the last E, so the E is actually 3 steps, depending on what's happening. So you have escape, evade, or you have engage.
Right.
And engage would be the very first thing we do or the very last thing we do. Very first thing we do is like, you're right there when the attack kicks off and you can't run, you can't hide, you're right there. You can't, reducing your size or whatever might not really cut it because of how close your proximity is to the threat. So the only option you have is to fight immediately and engage them.
Right.
Or it's the very last thing. I've evade. I can't get out of here. I can't escape. And now I go ahead and lock down and I set up an ambush position. And now I'm going to engage them at a choke point, whether that's a doorway, whether that's the corner of a hallway, an alley, I don't know, but somewhere where you can control and narrow down their position where they have to come through a tight corridor. So that way you can take away the one advantage that a firearm provides you, which is distance.
Right.
So that allows me to ambush them at a position where I can get hands-on and have a fighting chance, even though they still have the upper hand. It's the only way I can take on someone with a firearm is for me to take away their distance. If I don't take away the distance, then I'm kind of like, I can just go out, like I'm not going to go out on my hands and knees, but it's not a good game plan to try to.
Yeah, well, they have the upper hand at that point.
From a distance. Yeah. So, but that's like the Cliff Note version. And then basically the engage phase. The engage phase is where we would then start to bring in improvised weapons, violence of action, or our firearms tactics and techniques if we have one available.
Right. Let me ask a question. So especially that engage phase. I know that a lot of our listeners, they're going to zero in on that one, and maybe that's and as they think about their preparedness plan for daily life. I think you touched on it a little bit. They kind of think, well, I've got the gun, I'm ready, until they take a class and realize, well, I'm really not. So engagement against an active threat requires a certain mindset. And that mindset is, today's not the day that I'm going to die. And if I do, it's not going to happen easily for that other guy. Right. So,
yep.
I think that kind of maybe answers how important mindset is, but what part of mindset, what aspects of mindset, in your opinion, are important for the survivor, or at least the unwilling participant in their own demise? What parts of mindset are most important? And then how can they cultivate that? Hey folks, David here. I want you to think about the handgun you carry for your own protection, and I really want you to think about the holster you carry it in. Do you have trouble concealing your handgun? Does it feel like no matter what you do or how you dress, it's painfully obvious to everyone that you're carrying concealed? Well, I want to take a moment to introduce you to Squared Away Customs. Squared Away Customs is a manufacturer of custom, high-quality holsters for both concealed carry and duty carry. They provide a catalog of holster designs to choose from, and they are glad to take on custom work to design something to meet your specific needs. Mark and his team take pride in providing an excellent product at a reasonable cost. They work hard to keep delivery times short, and their number one goal is to ensure that their customers are satisfied. Squared Away Customs also offers a heroes discount to military, police, emergency medical workers, and educators. And for listeners of the Shooters Nation podcast, Mark offers a reduced pricing if you use coupon code Shooters Nation. Again, that's Shooters Nation as the coupon code. So, before you strap that cheap floppy store-bought holster on again, head over to squaredawaycustoms.com and treat yourself and your carry gun to something more worthy of the challenge. So,
Yep.
I think that kind of maybe answers how important mindset is, but what part of mindset, what aspects of mindset, in your opinion, are important for the survivor, or at least the unwilling participant in their own demise? What parts of mindset are most important, and then how can they cultivate that?
Well, the first aspect is we have to control as best we can. Again, we're going to go into shock, and we're going to be freaking out. You're going to be scared, but at the same time, I want to try to control my breathing. I want to control my anxiety and try to bring those stress levels down as best I can, so that way I can make good decisions. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of things around me, from improvised weapons or whatever, seeing exits, simple things of understanding if I'm running toward a door, which way the door opens before I get to the door. You know what I mean? And right. I need to be clear-minded as best I can and be making smart decisions and taking information. So I need to be looking for the information that's there for me that's going to give me a higher likelihood of success. Now, when it comes into the engage part, if we're going to engage, it's one of these things that I say to our clients, and it always sounds stupid in the beginning. Then afterwards, like, okay, now it makes sense. But it's just a stupid phrase. And I'm like, if you're going to go, go. But if you're not, then don't. And they're like, that's the dumbest thing I've heard. That's so obvious. Right. But it's one of those things. If I'm going to engage, I can't half-ass it. I can't semi-commit. Right.
Right.
And that's where in the military we talk about violence of action. Like, if I'm going to go, I'm going to commit, and I'm going to go with everything I have. And I'm going to be so violent, right, that I'm going to override you. You ever see that barroom brawler? Like, you have someone who has all sorts of, like, they might have been doing martial arts for a long time, and they have great technique, and they know all the different, moves and strikes and all this stuff, and all the little fight templates and everything. And then they go against that dude who's just that drunk brawler who is so unorthodox and just so overly violent in the way he fights that this person with all this training has no idea how to handle this person. And they wind up, not being able to implement all the stuff that they've trained on against this guy because he's just way too violent, and he sucks at fighting, but he's so violent that you can't do anything about it. Sure. Like, you know what I mean? And he keeps winning.
He goes all in.
Yeah. Tank Abbott in the UFC.
Yeah.
You like that?
Exactly. So there's something to be said for that. And one of the things that I bring up, especially with the women, when we're working in the corporate environments, and these people, they're not used to getting hands-on with people and punching and kicking and, firearms training. Maybe they've never been in the military or law enforcement. I mean, these are just good people. You know what I mean? And one of the things I say to the ladies in particular is, I'm like, hey, when someone messes with your kids, I ask the ladies, I'm like, who has children here? And, usually a good portion raise their hands. And I go, you know what? When someone messes with your kid and you go into mama bear mode,
right?
And they're like, oh yeah. And you hear like some of the people in the back going, mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You just see the women, like the light bulb goes off when you talk to the ladies and you go, when someone messes with your kid and you go in the mama bear mode, right? I'm like, that's where you need to be. That same mindset where you just went in your mind when I said that, that's where you need to be. And your attitude is, you came here to try to harm me, right? And if you take me away from my child, you're messing with my child, and you're going to hurt my child because you're taking away their mom.
Right.
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 So indirectly, they're attacking your child because your child's going to be, orphaned from their parent, if this person succeeds. So if you go, you're going to go with complete violence of action to override that threat, and all the playing by the rules and being nice goes out the window, right? Because your only thought process is win,
sure,
and at whatever cost necessary. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's where we get into improvised weapons. You start getting creative. Anything I can put in my hands that's harder than my fist helps. You know what I mean? Everyone carries these metal Yeti mugs.
Yeah.
Like, you can use those to strike. You could use the fire extinguisher. You could use all sorts of stuff. You know what I mean? And
right.
then if you have the kids, who maybe they're not big enough to fight, but the kids, if they have backpacks, they have those new backpacks that you can put in the body armor plate in there, or they can just grab their school books or their laptops and throw a bunch of stuff. And if they're running away from the bad guy, throw the backpack on their back. If they're facing the bad guy, put the backpack on the front. You know what I mean?
Right.
And this way, again, they can, if they're thinking clearly, they can do some of these little things that'll help, again, increase the odds of success. There is no guarantees, obviously, but, we can put the odds in our favor so that at least we have a fighting chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
When you go into some of these companies and you're going there to teach these things, and how is it received amongst the masses? I mean, is everybody very interested and very much eager to learn, or do people look at it as like, why do we have to do this?
No, honestly, the response I've got has been overwhelmingly positive. And
Awesome.
A lot of the higher ups at the companies, they're nervous when they bring me in because they're like, oh man, we don't want this to like freak all the people out. And, I don't know if they're going to like this training, but we think they should have it. And honestly, after I come in and do the course, and I just tell them like, look, dude, I'm not going to show all the videos. We're going to keep it PG rated. So I'm not showing all the graphic videos like we might do if we were working with law enforcement or something like that, or first responders. So, but the talk is still very serious, and people understand that this threat is serious. And honestly, at the end of it, they go, man, I feel so much better prepared. And what they really want to do, for the ones that it's just a lecture where we come in and we teach the thought process behind it and the game plan, right? They're like, man, we want to do this. Like we want to go pressure.
Oh, wow.
test.
That's
we
good.
want to do the hands-on.
Yeah.
Like, and we offer that, but a lot of times the companies are like, let's just feel it out. Let's just do the lecture part first.
Right.
And do the theory part and see how people, receive it. And honestly, probably 8 out of 10 people are like, dude, we want to do the hands-on. Like, the theory was awesome. I want to go practice that ambush technique at the door. I want to, practice, fighting with improvised weapons. I want to practice moving through the building, doing the escape or the evasion, how to work the hallways, how to move and, keep track of where the bad guy is as they're moving through the building, and practice all this stuff. You know what I mean? And learn the layout of the building and everything, and learn how to use angles and dead space and everything like that. So, the people want to learn. The people want to share this stuff with their families, and they want to pass knowledge on to their children and stuff like that.
Man, that is,
or their spouse. You know what I mean?
That is so
good
telling.
Information. It's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's so telling, right? And so I would say, if you're listening to this and you're thinking that, man, I wish my company would bring, Rich in to teach this, or heck, even the local, police department to come in, ask, right? Because if chances are your leadership team, I see this at work all the time. And I'm going to be honest. I know that my boss listens to the podcast occasionally. So, hey, boss, I'm not talking about you. He's squared away, right? But we've got the folks higher up on the totem pole that, when you get up there, it's all politics, it's all executive appearance and all that stuff. And, knuckle dusting is not in their head. They don't think about this, but sometimes it takes the workforce to say, no, we want you to teach us how to protect ourselves. Cause hell, the news is giving all the fuel that you need these days for why this is relevant. And, That's very telling that the people that you're going to are hungry for the information. Let me ask, do you think that this class gives the average, office worker or the average employee, the average polite person license to think about a bad situation? I mean, because it seems like once you flick the switch for them, they're all in and they're hungry. But is like the polite, gentle society that we all kind of live in, does that keep us from wanting to think about it? And this class gives them the license to start thinking about it?
Yeah, and honestly, one of the things that we do is, I don't push the limits as far as being disrespectful, but it's not. We take a lot of the political correctness stuff out,
mm-hmm.
and people really honestly appreciate it. They're like, finally, someone's just going to come talk to me and be real with me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And here's an example, right? When we come in, one of the companies we were working with, there was a bunch of Muslim people in the room. Out of the group of, like, usually we'll do it in smaller groups so we can have more interaction. So let's say there's 25 people.
Okay.
And maybe there was like 5 people out of the 25 that were Muslim.
Okay.
And I'm like, hey guys, so here we are. One of the big threats is, when we think of a terrorist, what do you think of?
Sure.
Give me some things that you think of when we think of terrorists. And no one wants to say, and like, it's like cricket. And I'm like, okay, when you think of terrorists, I'm just going to say it because I know what you guys are thinking, but no one wants to say it. You think of a Muslim extremist.
Right.
Right. And then you see them, they get uncomfortable. And I'm like, hey man, I'm not attacking you guys. Right. But we've been at war with radical Islam for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Let's not sugarcoat it. It is a threat. But what is the definition of terrorism? Right. And we go, terrorism is to push a political, social, economic, religious agenda through the threat and fear of violence.
Right.
So if we understand what terrorism is, yes, radical Islam is operating as a terrorist group, right? But the KKK, they were also terrorists.
Yeah.
Right? Black Lives Matter is terrorist. So it doesn't matter if you're the white people, if you're the black people, if you're the Muslims, or if you're Antifa, right?
Sure.
These people are trying to push their agenda through fear that if you don't comply, we will come in, we'll smash your town, we'll kill your people, we'll beat you up. You know what I mean?
Right.
We'll burn your store, right? So understanding that this is what terrorism is, and let's go back and understand what it actually is so we can identify it and not get put into, like, pigeonholed into little certain stereotypes that we have.
Right.
And when we talk about things like that, and it's just like, hey, dude, it is what it is. These are just facts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people, you can see the tension when we start talking about it. You bring it up. There's so much tension in the room. And then all of a sudden, all the tension just drops and like, oh my gosh, we can actually just have a discussion about it.
Yeah, you made it real at that point. I think everybody can relate to bullying. Even the Muslim employees understand what bullying is. And terrorism is bullying at an exponentially higher level. And so you've made it real, and now everybody's on the same page.
Yep. And then we do the same thing also at the end. We talk about, creating an environment for success. And then we translate it back into our leadership and what can you do as an individual to decrease the odds of one of these attacks happening where you work.
Right.
And we talk about, how the employees control the tempo and the atmosphere of a company. Like the people who own the company can put in the rules, but really the employees are the ones who control the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And you can fire employees and bring new ones in, but the employees control the atmosphere. And it's like, hey, you guys work here. What kind of atmosphere do you want to work in?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And why'd you come here to work? You came here to make money, right? You didn't come here to make friends.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have friends at work, but you didn't pick your job because you're like, yeah, this is where I want to go to make all my new friends. You're like, this is where they're going to pay me.
Right.
So this is where I'm going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So show up and do your job. And we talk about from a leadership standpoint and from a teamwork standpoint and a communication standpoint of how can we work better within our work environment and have a more successful work environment, have a more successful company. And if we do this correctly, it decreases the odds that an active shooter or workplace violence type of attack happens where we work versus somewhere else.
Right. Right.
So again, like we were talking about, all this stuff intertwines at some point and it all comes back and they all parlay off each other.
full spectrum, right? It's the full spectrum, not just the individual, but the scenario and the circumstances and the setting, whether it's school, church, business. You have to look at the whole thing as a sum of many parts, moving parts, and figure out how you can control it to make it a positive experience, whether it's to make it a safer environment, more inclusive, what have you. It's or just how do you control the environment, even if you don't have any control over it at the shopping mall, right? Yeah, and so that's I mean, it's so simple, but it's not. I mean, it takes somebody like you to come in and say, okay, hey, look, let's break it down Barney style so that you can understand the simple parts of it, put it back together. And now you got something useful to change your world for the better. So that's cool. Let me ask.
There's many in our life that are very, very simple.
Yeah.
The context is simple. To actually put in the discipline to execute them or to practice them or to, implement them is where the discipline part comes in. And that's the hard part. Like working out, like you guys were talking about running before,
Yeah.
Running itself is hard. The concept of going for a run is very simple.
Yeah.
To actually wake up in the morning and be disciplined enough to go for a run before you go to work is difficult.
Right.
You know what I mean? As many of these things, the context of it is very simple in nature. The theory behind it is very simple in nature. To actually put it into motion and to execute it is where it becomes challenging for us as the individual to be disciplined enough to actually execute it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's easy. It's easy to put off the things that are either uncomfortable or unpleasant and just dismiss them and not invest in the time and the resources to be better prepared to deal with whatever that unpleasant thing is, whether it's, you can put in the time to go to a class and learn how to use your weapon more efficiently, or you can just go buy a couple more guns and spend the money there. Which one's easier? Which one's more appealing to the guy that wants to post the pictures on Instagram or whatever? It's the buy the more crap, not take the more classes, So, so I got a question for you, and I think we're kind of bearing down a little bit on our midpoint. And when we come back, I definitely want to talk, quite a bit about the physical fitness side of being prepared and how that is an investment into a person's overall responsiveness and response plan. But leadership. So you mentioned that earlier, and that is something I think that you guys in the teams y'all do a fantastic job of cultivating that, whether it's following leadership or being good leaders. How do you take that and translate that into skills for the civilian in emergency situations? So how important is leadership? What is important in leadership in an emergency, an active shooter or a natural disaster or whatever, right? Something that you have to survive. And then how do you cultivate that? Because from what I've seen, leadership in a business situation means one thing, and what we're talking about here is totally different. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. So there's two different contexts. So leadership in a workplace or leadership in the military, one of those things is you can have dictator leadership where it's my rank or my job position mandates that you listen to me. So I get to dictate my what it is that I need from you and what you're going to do, right? Because I have a position of authority over you.
Right.
So in that case, a lot of people who will work for you, but you're not leading them. Does that make sense? Like they're doing it because they have to, not because they respect you. They respect the position, not the person, right? So then there's the people that you lead by example, you set the bar, you inspire, you motivate, and they feel obligated to work for you because they don't want to let you down, right? And that's when you're truly leading, and you're putting people in the right positions. You're asking them to do the right things. You're tasking the right individuals to do the right jobs based on what their strength zones are, and you're identifying that, and you're putting the right people, and you're setting your team up for success because you're putting the right people on the right jobs. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That is different than when we go into an active shooter situation where most people have no idea what's going on. They don't know what to do. And if you do know what to do in one of these situations, if people don't know what to do, they're going to panic, right? And normally when they're going to panic, they're going to make the worst decision possible, usually, right?
Right.
So one of the things that you can do in one of those situations, even if you're scared out of your mind, if you can get your composure together and you can go, hey, snap out of it. You, I need you guys. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And you're going to do these things right here. And together, this is our game plan. You formulate a game plan real quick. Like, let's say you're locked in a room and you're going to set up an ambush position. You're going to watch the door and, and try to assault someone if the attacker comes to that room that you're in, right? You have time to very quickly, by showing a little bit of confidence and taking control and leading out and giving someone something to do. A lot of times it's like when we work with the dogs, you know what I mean? The dogs, if you leave them up to their own accord, they're going to run around and they're just going to be freaking out and chewing stuff and jumping all over the place. And you go, boom, plutz, jump up onto this, hop onto this little elevated stool or whatever, plutz. And all of a sudden the dog's like, okay. And even though all you asked the dog to do was to lay down on this elevated object, it now has a job.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, all that anxiety actually comes out and depletes from the dog because now it has something to focus on.
Right.
And we can do that where the people are in panic. You can go, you with me. This is what I need you to do right here. And this also translates if someone gets hurt. Like if you witness a car crash, and you come running out and you have some medical training and there's all these people just standing around with their cell phones like, oh my gosh. And they're just standing there filming it. Hey, dude, put the phone down. I need you to do this.
Yeah.
Boom. Hold him here. Grab that. Call 911. Stop filming and call 911. Hey, drag this person away from the car. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, okay. And you'll see that people actually start doing what it is that you need, right? If you just give them direction.
Wow.
Right? But for us to give them direction, we need to have an understanding of what direction do we need to take them.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
really,
in that case, sometimes doing something is better than nothing.
So one person can change a whole scenario. One person that has their wits about them and has had a little bit of training, maybe has worked with somebody like you to figure out ahead of time how you handle these things and how you think through a stressful environment. They can change the scenario for a lot of people.
Yep. So when I run a shooting course, if someone, thank God, we've never had anyone, get shot at any of our, courses, knock on wood, right? But if when we run the course, the way that we do it, and I've seen this in other training, I was going to an event training under another instructor, and it was we were doing edged weapons training. We were doing knives and other types of sharp object training combatives in this phase of the training. And they had this big piece of plywood, and they were talking about the different things that you could stab into wood. And it was like, obviously the knives stabbed into it. They took a piece of rebar and they like slammed it into the wood, and the rebar went through the wood. And they're like, even something like that, you can utilize to create damage or whatever. So anyway, they're stabbing into this piece of plywood, and we're in a classroom, and this piece of wood loses its balance and it tips over and it falls with all these knives sticking out of it, right? And it lands on the dude in the front row, and his reaction was to put his arm up to try to stop the thing. And one of the knives on the wall just went right into his forearm and just filleted him open bad.
Wow.
Right. But this is what happened. You had all these people in the class, and everyone's on their own game plan, on their own program, trying to figure out what to do to help. So you have like 5 different people calling the police. 3 different fire departments are getting called, and people are all over the place. They're trying to get a head count. They're trying to get everything organized, and people are all over the place, and everyone's got their own idea of what they're going to do. And it was just a complete cluster. You know what I mean? It was a great learning experience for me, witnessing it and watching it unfold.
Right.
So what we do in our shooting courses after seeing this, and it's like, hey man, if anyone gets hurt, here's the number 1 medical guy who's going to be in charge.
Yeah.
Everyone stop what you're doing, clear and safe your guns, and everyone, you get in a line right here, and we designate a spot. Everyone's in a line right here, and there's the medical kit, and you are standing by for instructions, and the lead medical guy and the second in control medical guy are going to issue everyone orders of what they need. And they'll pick people to fulfill it. And then if there's extra things we need, whoever's the RSO will then go, hey, I need these other tasks done. But now everyone's just standing by waiting for instruction. So, and it happens, it's happened really good. And we haven't had to utilize it for anyone getting shot or anything like that. But when we run the scenario of it and just try to, do a dry run of it, everyone's like very responsive and it's way more controlled. But again, people when they don't know what's going on or they get scared or get flustered or anything like that.
Yeah.
They're looking for direction.
Right.
Right. And it actually is less stressful it's more stressful for them to try to figure out what they think they need to do at that time versus you going, hey, I need you to do this. And they go, oh, thank God. Okay.
Right,
now I have a task.
Now I have a job.
And it's not up to me. Now I have a job and I'm going to do exactly what this job is. And it's actually less stressful and they become way more focused and productive. So you can definitely change the whole environment very quickly by just, grabbing people, talking, looking them straight in the face, right in their eyes, and just talking directly into them saying, hey, snap out of it. I need your help. This is what I need you to do right now. And they go, okay. And a lot of times they will.
Yeah, we see this at work all the time in very non-violent situations where, work comes in and we learn pretty early on until you make it someone's job, it's no one's job, right? Because it's just chaos otherwise. And then when you start handing out work, everybody's like, oh, okay, cool. I don't have to think anymore. I can just go do. And that's, it kind of helps. I mean, you still want people thinking in a situation like this, but they need to know who's in charge. And that person's going to call the shots and help orient them. That's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. Well, it focuses their thinking. So we still want them to be thinkers, but now they're focused on a specific task.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, instead of them thinking about 5,000 things, now it brings it down to like 10 things.
Yeah.
They don't need to make a decision.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now it's all they're focused on that specific task at hand.
Well, and it's got to be good for the leader because he's not having to think about 10,000 things. He's thinking about the 10 things that he just divvied up to the 10 people, right? So, are you doing what I told you to do? Are you doing what I told you to do? Okay, you're watching the door. You got that guy. You got the fire extinguisher where, hey, you've got that dude giving first aid. Okay, you're doing the jobs. I'm not having to think about that stuff anymore. Y'all have got it. And now he can focus on the logistics of the thing, of the situation, whatever it is. So, or she.
Yeah, and that's how it normally be. I mean, the leader would normally be the if you were looking at an orchestra, it would be the little dude standing there with that little stick that he waves around.
Right.
Whatever that dude is. It's a composer. I don't know who the hell the guy is, but that little, but that dude standing there on the podium with his little magic wand.
Right.
Like,
the conductor, right?
He's not getting to play the instruments. He doesn't get to play the instruments because he's delegating who's doing what at what time. And he's overseeing it. And that's the leadership role, right? The other people are all going, I have my certain notes that I have to play on my specific instrument, and I'm going to do my job. And if everyone else does their job, then this is going to sound amazing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's a perfect illustration.
So again, they're not, the drummer isn't worried about what the dude on the saxophone's doing.
Right.
He's worried about playing the drum.
Right.
That's not, the saxophone isn't his problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to do my job. So again, we can very quickly, in these high stress environments, if we have the time, because we're in one of these rooms, whether it's a classroom or an office or something like that, and we have a bunch of people who are freaking out and they don't want to know what to do, we can quickly reassure them that you have a plan and we can win this and we're going to get on this. And basically you can give them jobs to do and lead out. And then basically with the hands-on side of the training that we do with these people, we can give everyone, some very simple things that they can do and ambush the attacker and overwhelm them with force and violence. And they have numbers on their side, hopefully, if there's multiple people in the room. You know what I mean?
I think it's really great and maybe I use the word progressive thinking for some of these employers to bring people like you into the workplace.
Oh, it is. Yeah, that is.
With their employees. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
But like, I'm thinking for those, like, it's probably not going to be every employer is going to do something like this. Right. But what I'm thinking is like, even if you don't have a meeting and just make a plan and designate some people to be like, you're the 911 person. You're the one worried about medical. You're the one watching the door. You're the one going to meet the ambulance at the front door. You know what I mean? Have a plan so that if something was to happen, it's not just chaos and everybody scattering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I tell them. Like, you guys should have a med kit in your office, and then there's people who've been EMTs or paramedics or nurses before, or, you know, and normally you have someone in a workplace who's done some of those jobs, or maybe some people have gone through a little bit of training, whatever.
Yeah.
And throw a couple med kits around the building. You know what I mean? You have a couple med kits around the building, and it's not like you need to walk around work with like a med kit on your waist, you know, or like an ankle tourniquet. You know, I know some people do, and they're hardcore about it, but if you have some of that stuff in different places in your workspace that you can get to quickly, and you can help, you know, in the after, that's the after action part, you know, but it's smart things to do and to designate it, to drive on it. And we provide this training on our Full Spectrum Warrior website. So the whole active shooter response training, our situational awareness training, all that stuff is on there on our members page. Because again, it's like, well, hell, my company's not doing it. You know, they're not bringing, you know, guys like you in to provide us that training. So I guess I'm not going to get it. It's like, well, there's websites out there. I'm not the only one who provides that kind of training, but our system is on our website. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where we've had a lot of people come through the training, and then they're like, they send me emails or they send me photos. They're like, hey, I'm here. My daughter's getting ready to go to college this year, and she's watching your videos online, you know, because I got the subscription, and we're going over the active shooter training and the situational awareness training. So when she goes to college, I don't have to worry so much. And for some parents, it's easier for someone like me to have it on video teaching them, where the parent tries to tell their kid, and then the kid's like, oh, come on, mom, like, quit being, you know, so paranoid, you know. And then if it's an outside source saying the same thing that their parents tried to tell them, it's oh, this is cool, you know, because it's not their parent telling them. You know what I mean? So
yeah. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We'll take a break here for midpoint, and we'll use this just as an opportunity to run a commercial, and you know, the three of us will chat. But when we come back, Rich, what I'd really like to talk about, Mark, I know you've got some excellent questions for Rich on the fitness training side, but Rich, I also want, you know, you've kind of just then hinted at a thing that you do through your company, Full Spectrum Warrior, where you have training available online, and it's something that people can take and use now in the comfort of their own home and at the privacy of their own range and things like that. And you kind of described it to us earlier. I really want you to share that with the listeners, because I think that
a deeper dive. Yeah.
That's a deeper dive. That's something that, again, that one person could take and change, and then maybe they are the agent of change to make things better at their respective organization, whether it's a church, a school, or a business, or whatever, right? So would love to have you kind of walk through that with our listeners, and we got some questions for you. So if you're game,
yeah,
we'll come back and we'll do all that. So cool.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, that concludes part one of our conversation with U.S. Navy SEAL Rich Graham. We will pick up where we left off in the next episode, and we hope that you'll join us again for the conclusion of this incredibly diverse and information-packed conversation with Rich. In the meantime, here's how you can connect with all of us after the show. For more information about Rich Graham and the Full Spectrum Warrior system, or to begin a conversation with him about training for you or your organization, head over to his website at fullspectrumwarrior.us. Also, be sure to follow Rich on Instagram as @FullSpectrumWarriorUSA and on Facebook as Full Spectrum Warrior US. To connect with Mark Lancaster after the show, you can find him at squaredawaycustoms.com or by email at info@squaredawaycustoms.com. While you're on the Squared Away Customs website, be sure to use coupon code ShootersNation, that's ShootersNation, all one word, to save yourself some cash. And last but not least, head over to shootersnation.com to connect with us and leave us your feedback. Submit new ideas for future episodes, and be sure to sign up for the Shooters Nation Mail Blast mailing list. That's it for now. We'll catch you guys again next week, but until then, be safe out there.
preceding segment was a production of the Shooters Nation podcast. Visit us online at shootersnation.com.